This is the Office of Student Support Programs and Services, and today's presentation will be going over information related to the identification and reporting of child abuse. As a school district employee who will have daily contact with students, you are often the first line of defense against child abuse, abandonment, and neglect. What you see may help identify a student who is being abused and get them the services needed for that child and family. These are the legal statutes that protect children, disabled adults, and elderly from abuse and neglect. It is required by law that any person who knows or has a reasonable cause to suspect that a child is abused, abandoned, or neglected by a parent, legal guardian, caregiver, or other person responsible for the child's welfare must report such knowledge or suspicion to the Department of Children and Families Child Abuse Hotline. Please note that proof of abuse or neglect is not required. The law does state that teachers and all other school personnel are obligated to report and provide their names. Failure to report can result in a first-degree misdemeanor. As noted, a child is defined as an unmarried person under the age of 18 years of age. When reporting, you are protected in two ways: immunity from liability and confidentiality. In summary, school teachers and other school personnel are required by law to report suspected child abuse and neglect. Proof of abuse or neglect is not required to make a report. Failure to report or prevent another to report is a first-degree misdemeanor and may be prosecuted. Reporters who make reports in good faith are protected by law in two ways: immunity from liability and confidentiality. This section will go over recognizing abuse and neglect. There are four types of abuse and neglect: physical abuse, physical neglect, sexual abuse, emotional abuse or neglect. This is the definition of physical abuse. Here are some of the behavioral indicators that might indicate a child is being physically abused. And here are some of the physical indicators that a child might be being physically abused. Physical neglect is the failure to provide the necessities of life for a child, such as nourishment, inappropriate clothing, consistent lack of supervision, unattended medical needs, poor hygiene, inadequate shelter. And here are some of the behavioral indicators that might indicate a child is being physically neglected. And here are some of the physical indicators that a child might be physically neglected. Sexual abuse can either be physical or non-physical. In cases of sexual abuse, often children do not report sexual abuse because they are led to believe they are a willing participant. Children may be hesitant to report sexual abuse because someone will get in trouble or their home will be disrupted. When sexual abuse is discovered, children may feel guilty about getting a friend or a relative in trouble. Here are some of the behavioral indicators that might indicate sexual abuse. And here are some of the physical indicators that might suggest a child is being sexually abused. Emotional abuse is the deprivation of emotional nourishment, such as ignoring or rejecting a child, humiliating or belittling a child, threatening a child, terrorizing a child, isolating a child, or corrupting a child by using them for illegal purposes, exposing them to controlled substance or alcohol. Here are some of the behavioral indicators that a child might be emotionally abused. And here are some of the physical indicators. It is important to consider when you're making your observation is how severe of the indicators you're seeing. How often are indicators observed? How often are indicators repeated? What medical, emotional, or behavioral conditions have similar indicators to those observed? If you want to speak to someone about a child whom you think might be being abused or neglected, here are some of the people that you can consult with: your school social worker, student services staff members, resource officers, your principal, or your supervisor. This final section is on reporting procedures for child abuse and neglect. Persons who know or have reasonable cause to suspect a child is being neglected must make a report. Abused or neglected must make a report. The reporter is someone who has the most first-hand knowledge of the situation. Remember, approval is not required and proof is not required. Reports may be made jointly with an administrator, school counselor, social worker, nurse, or other student services staff. However, if you suspect abuse, it needs to be reported immediately. If you're in doubt, you can certainly consult some of the other professionals mentioned, but do not delay in making a report if you have reason to suspect. Here are some ways that you can report child abuse or neglect. One is by calling the 1-800 number 96-ABUSE. Another is to fax a report to DCF. There is also an online reporting system, but please note that you should not use the online reporting system when an immediate response is needed. You should include your name, the name and addresses of the child, parent, or guardian, the child's age, and if you know the siblings' names and ages, the nature and the extent of the alleged abuse or neglect, including any physical description of the signs or incident of harm or injury, and the identity of the abuser if you know that. When you call the hotline, a hotline counselor will give your name. They will also give you a report identification number. Whether the report is being accepted for investigation, abuse hotline counselors decide on the best course of action. If you disagree with the counselor's decision on what action to take about the report, ask to speak to a supervisor. Here are some best practices when making a report. You can make it jointly with an administrator, supervisor, school counselor, social worker, or student services staff member. But remember, they cannot make the report for you, but can help and support you as you make the report. If the support person is not available, you need to make the report immediately on your own. Notify the school administrator as soon as possible after making the report. Remember, you do not need approval, but it is important to let the administrator know that a report has been made. Keep a record of the date, time, to whom the report was made, along with any notes containing the general information provided to the abuse hotline. Do not place these notes in the child's educational record. Here are some things that will happen after the report is made. Again, it's important to keep this information confidential, and you should not place it in the educational record. You also should not discuss this with the parent or caregiver about whom you've made the report. And never discuss the child's situation unless with a faculty or staff member who requires the information to perform supportive services. Here are some things that will occur when the CPI investigator comes to the school. To report abuse as mandated by law, it is the Florida Abuse Hotline immediately. To provide a place for the in-school interview, and to participate in interviews if appropriate by the child investigators. If you would like more information on child abuse reporting, you can visit the DCF website at www.myfamilies.com. Go to /services programs /abuse hotline. Thank you for your time.